Morning, Jazz. How are you?
Morning, Lena. I'm good today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for your time this morning. I know you have a busy Friday before the long weekend.
Yeah, busy Friday, just working, of course, because everything is still closed.
Yes, I think it will be for a little while still. Okay, so Jazz, thanks very much for taking the time this morning to answer a couple of questions for us. We have an interesting question this morning that I've been asked a lot. I think you've probably been asked this as well a lot. And I think a lot of people are just sort of in the dark as to what to do in this situation or what the legal ramifications of certain choices are. Question is, can I leave everything to my pet in my will?
Well, generally speaking, no, you can't leave everything to your pet in your will. The reason being is a pet, unfortunately, under the law is considered property. So you can't leave everything to property. That would be similar to leaving everything to your car, right? Um, Other provinces have other rules as to how a pet is considered, whether property or a sentient being. However, in Ontario, you can't leave everything to your pet. Now, theoretically, you could leave everything to your pet in a trust, and then it would go to your pet. However, the way the trust is set up, it would likely still, the remainder would still need to go to an individual or a charity.
I see. So you would have to appoint a trustee to sort of dole out the money and ensure that the pet is taken care of over time.
Exactly. So there would be a trustee, and then
Mhm.
the idea would be to have a condition that the individual who's receiving from the trust is not receiving anything unless they take care of the pet as you instruct in the trust.
Okay. How common is that to include those types of clauses in wills?
The pet trust itself is not very common. However, the more common one individuals usually like to insert in their will is a pet guardianship clause, which
Okay.
means that you appoint someone to take care of your pet after you pass away. And then what a lot of people like to do is leave a specific bequest to that individual to help defray the costs. So, there's veterinarian costs, food, shelter for the animal itself. What individuals usually would want to do is leave a certain amount to the family member, friend, or neighbor that's taking care of the pet to help just cover costs and things like that. Now, of course, a disadvantage to doing it that way is that a pet guardian clause with a specific bequest, there is no way to enforce the individual to spend the money in a certain way. Whereas in a trust, you can do that because in the trust, you can set it up in a way that the payments are conditional on them taking the pet to the veterinarian at least twice a month or something of that form.
That's a lot of vet visits.
Yeah.
Okay, so to summarize, if let's say I have a dog, which I do,
Yeah.
I could appoint, let's say, my brother to be the guardian of my pet. I know my brother's a dog lover. I've spoken to him about it. I know that he'll take good care of my dog. Um, and let's say my dog is, I don't know, 5 years old, and life expectancy of, let's be optimistic, let's say 20 years.
Yeah.
Case, but one can dream. So I'm expecting there to be another 15 years. And I allocate, $2,000 a year for my pet's life. So maybe I would set aside $30,000, which does seem like a lot, but to my brother in my will to so that he can act as guardian.
That's correct. Yeah. If you're doing like 2000 every few, let's say, months or so, then it would be more of a trust than a specific bequest. And I think if you want the benefit of doing it that way in a trust is that it's more likely that your brother can't take the amount and just spend it on, a brand new Mercedes instead of using it for your pet. So
Gotcha,
that's the
gotcha.
benefit of doing it in a trust. However, the disadvantages of doing a pet trust, is that one, the trust has to be validly drafted. So you need to ensure that that your lawyer or the individual drafting it reviews all the principles with regards to a trust. Leaving everything to the pet in a trust is not technically valid. There is a way to get around that by, of course, just leaving everything to the individual, like a beneficiary, however, on the condition that that they take care of the pet. Now, of course, with any trust, there is also a conflict of interest issue. If the guardian of the pet and the trustee are the same individual, then there is a potential for that person to release funds to themselves just for their own benefit and not use it for the pet itself.
Of course. No, it's interesting. There's a lot more details than I think a lot of people realize. But I would say, generally speaking, most people have someone that uh,
Yeah,
they trust, they have faith in, that they can say,
yeah,
you know, I can leave $10,000 to my brother, my neighbor, my friend. I know them well. I know they care about animals. I'm gonna give them the flexibility to spend the money as they see fit to take care of my dog should anything happen to me. And I think that's why that's a clause that's often used, because of the flexibility it affords.
yeah, I agree. And normally we try to draft the clause in the most flexible way, so we allow that the executor can choose the individual that will uh, be the guardian for the pets. And the benefit of that is, say if you name someone that's older than you, you know, there's a higher chance that they'll pass away before you. So this allows the executor to decide at the time you pass away who it should go to. And of course, you can always leave written instructions as to who the pets you prefer would, who you prefer the pet should go to.
Okay, no, that's really interesting, Jazz. So, um, let's talk about, in my case, I have a dog. My dog is probably, 4 years old. I'm older than that,
Yeah.
but my life expectancy would probably is longer than my dog's life. So if I'm to make a will right now and appoint a guardian for my dog Crumple.
Our chief morale officer.
Exactly, our chief morale officer. That's not something that's going to really affect anything in 20 years. In 20 years, I don't actually, unfortunately, expect Crumple to be alive anymore. So if you were the lawyer drafting my will, how would you draft my will to take that into account?
Well, then I would likely suggest that you do a general clause regarding all your pets or all your dogs that says that, you know, whichever dogs are living at the time of your death, those are the ones that are considered a part of that guardianship specific bequest clause or trust. And that way it allows you to not have to update your will just because your pet has passed away.
Is that similar to the guardianship clause you put in place for kids? If you've had one kid and you're kind of expecting to have two or three or four more?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, last question for you this morning. Let's say I don't have someone who I feel comfortable leaving my pets to or taking care of. Is there something I can insert in the will so that I can leave my pet to, let's say, the Humane Society?
Yeah, so there is a pet stewardship, as they call it, where you can leave it in your will. You can draft a clause that says that if you were to pass away, you'd like your pet to go to a specific society. However, we always recommend that you speak to that society first before doing that to ensure they're okay with it. I know a lot of adopted animals, usually sometimes they do require that if you do pass away, that the animals return to the shelter so that they can find a new home for them. And there are benefits to that. Of course, the Humane Society will, of course, take really good care of the animal, and they will do a thorough vetting of finding a new home for that pet. So that is a beneficial clause to insert, and a way if you don't have any friends or neighbors that can take the pet to ensure that your loved one is taken care of.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks so much. Anything else, any sort of pros, cons, anything else you want to add on this topic?
Yeah, so relatively, I just want to quickly sum up. So if you were to do a pet, if you were to want to leave something to your pet, you cannot leave anything to your pet. However, you can have a pet guardian. That means that is an individual that will take care of your pets when you pass away and will be like a caregiver to them. In addition to naming a pet guardian, you can leave a sum to the pet guardian to take care of the pet. So that'd be like for veterinarian costs, food, etc. However, there are disadvantages to using that method, which of course are once the bequest is made to that individual, there is no real monitoring of the spending of the funds. They could misuse it, right? And you can't leave really any specific instructions that are legally binding on the guardian themselves. If you would like to leave legally binding instructions and you would like to sort of try to not delegate, but try to control how the funds are used, then you're more likely wanting to draft a trust, which would say that your pet guardian is to use the funds for this specific purpose, and then they'll receive that funds for that purpose. However, the disadvantage of that is that you are setting up a trust, and with trust there are added costs. There is compensation that needs to be paid to the trustee potentially for setting the trust up, and you need to ensure that the trust is validly set up, which means it doesn't extend longer than 21 years, all the principles that we learn in law school. So it's important that you go through those when you set that clause up. And of course, I think the only disadvantage to a pet trust is that it's restrictive and also that it's not very economical. If you're paying the trustee a certain amount, the cost might exceed what you expected you were going to leave for your pet.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for the summary. That's interesting. I know we get this question all the time, and I think it's something that's often overlooked. So really appreciate a little bit of extra education for everyone on this.
Anytime, anytime.
Perfect. Have a great weekend. Thanks again. And looking forward to our next chat.
Yeah, for sure.